So now it's acting like we are just holding the sustain without those two extra parameters on. But what it's doing is it's creating a little gap between the... In this video, we're going to be looking at how we can make pads, plucks and things like that much better with two extra parameters that Spire offer. Now, I can guarantee that you've looked at these parameters, but you've probably most likely overlooked them like I did. So to get started, I've created a preset here in Spire. It's a pad. And I'm just going to demonstrate that to you in a second. But if you want this preset, you can follow along in the video as usual and copy the settings, and then you've got yourself a free preset. But if you want to just download it, you can consider being a Patreon supporter. You get to see the video early, so patrons have already seen this video before it's got released, and you get access to all other stuff as well. I'm getting some great reviews on the amount of content that I'm putting on there and how much that is exclusive to patrons as well. So with that said, let's have a listen to this. I'm just going to turn on delay and reverb, and then we'll turn these off after because it's best demonstrated what I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so that's the pad that we're going to be using. I'm going to turn off delay and reverb for this because we don't want to extend the note length using those two parameters. We want to utilize these two sort of sliders that we don't use. Now, if you do use these, please let me know in the comments. It'd be really interesting to see how many of you use these two parameters that I'm going to talk about today. But what we're talking about is slope time and slope level. So two sliders after the sustain slider on the envelope, and this is present on every envelope within Spire. So we're going to use envelope 1, the master default envelope, the amp envelope that controls the entire patch. And you can see I've got a slow attack, or slow-ish attack, full sustain, so it's going to hold full volume on that preset until I let go of the note, and then the release is going to tail off at the pace that I've set it. So you can hear it fades off pretty quickly when I let go of those notes. What slope time and slope level do is create sort of a secondary envelope after the first initial attack, decay and sustain. So if we look at what happens with the slope time, as soon as we activate it, it's deactivated at the moment. But if we just activate this by sliding it up, listen to what it does to the note, and I'm going to keep hold of the note. So this is what it sounds like with it off. It's just going to keep hold of that note forever until I let go of it and apply the release. But now we can override the release and go through slope time. Because slope level is set to 0, it means it's going to straight away send it to 0 volume. So before, and this is after, just slide it up a smidge. You can hear that it sounds like there's another decay rolling off after that sustain, which there is. Slope time is just creating another curve and it's returning it to absolute 0, so then this release doesn't matter at all. So what we do, I'm just going to turn this off. If you wanted your pad to be a little bit more sweeping and just hold and sustain a little bit longer after you've let go of the note, you just turn up the release. So you get something like this. You can see it takes a lot longer to drop to 0. So there's two things that we can do with this. We can choose the slope settings here just by clicking. So you can see default. You've got 3 different slope settings. That's for everything: attack, decay, even the sustain. And that helps you develop the preset. So if you want the release to last longer in this position, again, listen to the note how it sounds now. And it's off within half a second. So what we can do there is we can say, let's choose this to hold that note much longer because it's curved upwards, so it'll hold the note longer, but it'll still tail off pretty quickly. So you can hear it'll hold it and then it just disappears. So I think these are called logarithmic, linear and power modes. You can check it in the manual and that's the same for all of them, but I'm going to leave this on the default position and we're going to use the slope time. So let's demonstrate what's going on here. So you could hear when I just turned it on, it will sort of get to the sustain, hold it for a while, and then it'll just drop off and turn off, just like we've turned the level down. So I'm going to put this to about 50%, and you're going to hear now that it's going to slope off gently and then sort of head into the release a little bit. So what's going to happen here is it's going to sound like we've got a bit of release, but then it's going to go down to 0, still fairly quickly because our slope level is 0. So you can hear it holds it much nicer, but it still acts like a release. But if we turn up the slope level, and let's just turn it up to 50 as well, it's going to slope the sustain level down to 50%, so we're going to still hear it at 50% volume, and then it's going to go into the release when we let go of the key. So now it's acting like we are just holding the sustain without those 2 extra parameters on. But what it's doing is it's creating a little gap between the sustain and the release to create a much smoother and more controlled release. You get much more control over it. So I'm going to let go of this note now. So you can hear we've just got that little extra between. It doesn't sound too much different at the moment. But I'm just going to turn up the slope time, bring down the slope level a little bit, bring up the release just a smidge, maybe closer to 60% of release. So listen to how that holds. I'm going to turn the slope time off. So it doesn't sound too much different, but what this gives us is gives us the ability to really sort of bring this to about here, so maybe 3/4 of the way. It'll sustain it down gently into there and then down into there. So imagine curved lines between each slider and it'll just give you that level. So you can see the level's going to dip below the release level, but this is really time rather than volume. And that sounds like we've started to add a little bit of reverb where we extend the note times. If I'll play this again a couple more times and then I'll turn that slider off and we'll listen again. So what you'll say is, that doesn't sound any different to me, but what happens is when you're holding the note. So you can see the sustain is at 100%, it will keep that volume till you let go of that key and then the release is applied. But this is overriding the sustain and it's telling it to slope down over a certain time period to this slope level, so a new sustain level. So you've got 2 sustains essentially with a decay between them. So if I hold these keys now, you'll hear it drop off. So now you can hear it's dropped to 50% and then the release is applied. Like so. So if we turn this off again, you're just going to hear that sustain note stay at 100% volume. And it'll stay there forever. So that is the beauty of SLT and SLL. So really all you need to see is that we've got attack, decay, sustain, release. That's really what we're looking at there. It's an extra bit, but this one relies on the initial key presses, whereas this one then automates afterwards. Very similar to if you was to use, for example, a step generator. If you create a shape in there, the longer you hold the key, it'll follow that shape and change that parameter over time. That's exactly what we're doing here, but on a more basic level, but it gives you a lot more depth in your preset design. So there we are. Now you know what those 2 extra parameters do, and you can experiment making some pads and plucks. I just think they work really well in a trance setting because we work with a lot of pads, plucks, drones and stuff that flows and sort of evolves in the background. There's all sorts of things that we can use that for. So to have those 2 extra controls without going into too much depth gives you a lot of extra control over your sound. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more videos like this one and you did enjoy the video, you know exactly what to do, and I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care.